On this 100th Veterans Day, dozens of Utah veterans are in Washington, D.C. to see the war memorials built in their honor.
I mean, it's just special to go and see the Vietnam, especially because that's when I was there. To have it fall on Veterans Day is very special.
That's Ron Romero. He is a U.S. Army veteran, says he feels serenity seeing the names of people he knows on the wall. Local leaders, including Governor Herbert, Senator Mitt Romney, and Representative Ben McAdams, were there to send the 48 veterans off in style, thanking them for their service, as of course we all do.
It's wonderful. I can't believe all the things people have gone to make it special for us. I want to cry to begin with, but I am thrilled to pieces. I'm just thrilled that we were able to come.
What a cool experience. And as you may know, KSL has been involved with honor flight trips for several years now.
Yeah, Jed Boal and Doug Wright, you guys have been on these trips. You've been on one, Jed 5 times. What an experience for these veterans. How do you even explain what they go through on this trip?
You know, it's amazing to see that video. It brings back all kinds of memories. The thing that really strikes me the most in those memories was how poignant and important it was for those World War II veterans that we were traveling with at that time to go to the World War II Memorial, which had not been built when they were young men or even old men. It was not completed until roughly 15 years or so ago.
Yeah, and it was so controversial. Right. They were always reinventing it.
So to see them go back to the memorial that had been created in their honor and to see the tears flow freely from that experience was just amazing.
Do you know what I remember from that? And I only went on one. But I can remember, first of all the preparation for it and interviewing some of the people, but the flight itself, the kickoff that they got here in Salt Lake and that big hangar and everything, remember that? And all of the dignitaries that were there. And then to get on the airplane with these wonderful, you know, individuals. And they all got a packet, remember that? The kids had written to them in appreciation. But the one thing I'll never forget from our trip was Baltimore. Really? We landed in Baltimore, and as we went through the Baltimore airport, and for anybody who has ever been there, it's not one of the more beautiful, warm and fuzzy airports, but when people got the drift of what was actually happening and who these people were, do you remember how they all stepped aside and they started to applaud? And these veterans, many of them with, and they called them guardians, I'm not sure if they still do, but they had to go with an escort, and it was usually a family member. But you could just see tears and just the respect in the Baltimore airport. I will never forget that, just indelible for me.
Wow. And I'm sure, I'm just thinking of those who maybe came home and didn't receive any of that, you know, specifically those in Vietnam.
There was a real sad story when I was there. There was this great veteran, and he was being pushed around by someone who was obviously his son, pushed around, wheeled around by his guardian. And this elderly gentleman, the youngest person on that flight, was 86.
Wow.
We had 4 women on that flight, if I remember right, Jim. Wow. But I was just chatting. We were actually down at the Martin Luther King Memorial, and this younger person was pushing his dad, and I said, boy, it's great your dad still has parts of his uniform and that they fit, and we were all, and he said, you know, when I came home, and I had no idea he was a veteran, and he said, when I came home, we were told you'd be better off not to wear your uniform.
Wow.
This was Vietnam War era. Yeah. And he said, so many of us complied. Those who did not were treated quite disrespectfully, sometimes even spat upon, if you can believe it. Wow. But he said that now, after seeing his dad and seeing the change in attitude and the respect for all veterans, including the Vietnam era, he said, you know, I wish I hadn't given my uniform away or destroyed it. I can't remember what he did, but that just broke my heart.
Yeah. Wow. So change in attitude and really change in the nation's capital. You were saying some of these memorials weren't built until later on in these veterans' lives. What was it like for some of these veterans to see the names of the people that they served with engraved on these memorials?
You know, they had, many of these veterans had memories come back to them when they were sitting right there at the memorial. Some of them had battlefield memories of the loss of comrades right there on the battlefield. So these memorials that we've built in their honor are not only critical for them as they return and have those kinds of visits, but when we go back and we visit as tourists, I guess, it helps us understand the real emotions and the real blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to go through something like that for our country.
I'm curious what this is, how this has changed Veterans Day for each of you going on these flights and being able to experience these veterans, you know, see and visit some of the places and see the names of those they served with while they were still alive. How is this?
Oh, Veterans Day will never be the same for me. And you know what was interesting about the flight that I was on, and Jed's had many more experiences, but there were two people on there that had direct connections to me.
Really?
One was Mr. Knox, who was a science teacher at Evergreen Junior High School while I was there. I never had Mr. Knox, but he was beloved in the school because he taught any kid who wanted to learn chess. Everybody knew Mr. Knox. And then also there was a rather interesting name that I immediately recognized, and it was Delahanty. And I could tell, he looked so much like the person I knew with the name of Delahanty. Well, he was his brother who had served. There were so many connections, and it just brought everything so close to me, even though I had no living relatives on that flight or anything. But amongst those people that were there, those two direct connections. And as Jed alluded to, it was amazing to see a family member standing there with their father or the people that were there with their mothers. And they would look and they'd hear a story and they'd go, I'd never heard that. I'd never heard that before.
These stories would just come up.
Yeah, Dad, why didn't you tell me?
Right, sometimes they tell us things when we have a camera or a microphone on them that they won't necessarily tell their own family members. But I also certainly remember that it gave me an understanding of their age group of guys. We had all kinds of moments in between visiting memorials where we had a chance to talk to these guys who were from Mona and Tooele County and grew up all in the Uinta Basin, had grown up all over Utah, to tell us also what life was like in Utah at that time. And it really helped fill in a certain kind of texture for what life in Utah was like then, but also the kind of struggles that they went through during wartime at home, which we don't really feel the same way during modern warfare.
Right.
But everybody here at home during World War II knew that they were at war, and that certainly impacted the lives of everybody around them.
This is a term that comes from the old movie, It's a Wonderful Life. We had a lot of people who, for whatever reason, did not or could not serve. And so I call them the George Baileys. They're the people that went on the scrap drives. They're the people that, because of their health, their age, or whatever it was, they weren't able to serve when many of them truly wanted to. And boy, we had a lot of George Baileys here on the home front. And it's important, too, to remember this is a little of the other side of the coin, and maybe even the coin standing on its edge. We had prisoners of war here from Italy and Germany, and we also had an internment camp here in the state of Utah that was just outside of Delta, Utah, Topaz. And what's so interesting about the internment camps is while parents and siblings and everything else, there were so many young men, 442nd, wasn't it, if I remember correctly, the most highly decorated unit in the European theater. They were all Japanese Americans. And while their parents were behind barbed wire at home, right here in Utah and up in Idaho, over in Colorado, down in California and elsewhere, they were serving valiantly over in the European theater. So Utah, along with so many other things that were supporting the war effort, including Columbia Steel, that now we all knew as Geneva, and Hill Air Force Base and everything else, Utah was a real epicenter of the conflict in every way.
It's just crazy to see all of those connections and really to see both of your experiences and how you were able to connect to this time where, we just read about in history books. But we appreciate you sharing your stories and what an awesome experience to be on those flights.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug Wright and Jed Boal. And of course, thank you to all the veterans out there.